for folks who maybe haven't run across the Handy Answer Book series before, I guess I would describe this as the sort of book that you keep on the coffee table and read a couple of chapters or read a couple of questions and answers, and then put it back down. It's not a read it from the beginning to the end book in a sitting, is it?
You're so much classier than I am, because I always tell people it's a bathroom book. You can sit it in the bathroom, and if you have a couple of minutes on your hand, you can dig into a chapter. And exactly, you're right. It's designed to dip into and delve into. When I was a boy growing up, I don't know if you had these here in the States, but we used to get a lot of treasury books. And by that, I mean like the boys' treasury of history and the girls' treasury of, things like that. And it was designed for you to just educate yourself on a whole range of things, like a buffet. It's kind of a buffet book.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think is really key in this book is you don't have to be a historian. You don't have to be a military scholar. It's really written in a fashion that anybody can pick it up and get something out of it. I have a vague memory of who this guy is. Let me look up and see what he really did during the war, that sort of thing. And I think in that regards, when you were writing it, was that your audience, a really broad audience as compared to sort of, history buffs?
Yeah, I think history buffs are, and I am one myself. So there is definitely a place on every history buff's bookshelf for general overview books. But I also am a big fan of reaching an audience that perhaps doesn't know as much as they would quite like about not just the history of their military, but how it runs today. A lot of people don't know, for example, beyond rescuing people who are threatened on the seas, what the Coast Guard actually does. They don't know that the Coast Guard perhaps plays a key role in fighting smugglers of drugs and human trafficking, and even if they do, they probably don't know that the earliest Coast Guard lighthouse keepers, a number of them were females who behaved in a very heroic way.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the Coast Guard, often forgotten, but you answered a question, and I think it's on page 249, that I when I saw it, I said, well, I don't know the answer to that at all. And that was like, what's the origin of the racing stripe that's on the Coast Guard ships? And you gave an answer that makes sense to me.
And you look at a Coast Guard vessel and you see that stripe and you think, oh, okay, yeah, that's a Coast Guard ship as opposed to a Navy ship. And that was exactly what the Coast Guard was trying to achieve. It was branding, and it didn't exist before 1967.
Yeah, that's the one paragraph answer to a question that you kind of that's stuck in my head somewhere. I don't really know the answer to that. On the Air Force, I think it's page 329. You have a discussion on one of my favorite airframes called the Warthogs. And you hear
the
people,
infantryman's friend.
Even today, they talk about Warthogs. And I think if you're uninitiated, you don't know what they're talking about. And this is the kind of book that you pick up and you go, yeah, I've heard them use that term on the news or something, but what are they talking about? Well, you've answered that question, haven't you, Richard?
Absolutely. I mean, I love the Warthog, or the Thunderbolt, as it's, I guess, more properly called, but everybody I know calls it the Warthog. And some people used to call it the Devil's Cross because of the shape it made. I guess that depends on which side you're on. But yeah, that is the best friend the infantry soldier has in combat quite often. Essentially a whole aircraft built around a big 30 mil rotary cannon. The pilot sits in this armored bathtub. And the number of smart munitions, Maverick missiles, ordnance that hang on the wings of this thing, it is a flying artillery support battalion, essentially. And I just adore the A-10. I saw one recently flying at the Colorado Air Show, in fact, this past summer.
Well, and every now and again they say, well, we're going to get, because it's an old airframe, they say, we're going to get rid of the A-10 Warthog, and all kinds of people come to its defense. And it may be old, but man, it does the job for which it's designed. And again, I think that's the kind of question you answer.
Look at the B-52 in that same light, And the reason these airframes exist after decades, now we're looking at over half a century in some cases, is that they do the job they were built for so well. there's no need to go back to the drawing board for something like the B-52 or the A-10 or the C-130, you know?
No, absolutely. And a lot of these pieces of equipment, if you will, that the military use, their names become kind of iconic, but you may have lost, maybe you saw it mentioned in a movie or in a book, and one of those is the Higgins boat, which comes up into a question you posed on page 151, which was, what was that boat that won World War II? And you talk about that story, and I think it's a classic example of, I've heard Higgins boats before, but I don't really remember what the hell they're tied to. Tell us about that.
Listen to this full episode and more on the Apple Podcasts app, Blog Talk Radio, Google Podcasts, or iHeartRadio. And now streaming on Amazon Music, Audible, and Spotify.